Welcome everybody to episode 1. Episode 1, the very first episode
Number
of
one.
Game Talk Radio. This is
Talk.
our new podcast where we're going to talk about game news. Now, we're not reporters. We're not going to be hopefully sharing this news with you for the first time. We just hope to tell you some news and then give you our spin on it. So that's kind of our shtick, if you will. And just try to deliver the weekly news to you in a way that you might find entertaining, hopefully. My name is Greg. I'm the host. And with me, as always, the beautiful Jen, my co-host and producer. How are you today, Jen?
Oh, fine and dandy.
Excellent, excellent. Well, let's get right into it. So what's our first topic today? What are we talking about first today?
All right. First article we're going to talk about was actually on Eurogamer.net and by Tom Phillips. Talked about earlier this week, Hi-Rez Studios released a new gameplay trailer for Paladins.
Okay.
And the little kerfuffle that happened, it seems as though some people are thinking, that Paladins trailer looks a lot like Blizzard's Overwatch.
Okay. So they released a new trailer for their game they've been working on for a while.
Mm-hmm.
It comes out, and people feel it resembles Overwatch, and they just say, oh, it's a ripoff.
Yes.
Okay, so then obviously, rightfully so, co-founder of Hi-Rez, the makers of said game, they're not very happy about that. So what does he do?
He took to Reddit to defend his company's game. It was a post called A Brief History of Paladins as a response to copy clone allegations, where actually Tom Harris broke down how the game came about in pre-production, and it was years ago.
Okay.
And they're aware that there are similarities, but there's just as many differences that people maybe aren't seeing because they haven't actually played the game yet. He points out, Overwatch is a little bit more advanced than Paladins. They have 100 abilities compared to Paladins' 85.
So he actually admits that. So
Yeah.
he comes out and he actually says, hey, our game isn't like Blizzard's like $80 billion game that they spent money on.
Right.
Okay, cool.
But then,
respect to him on admitting that. Okay.
and so he's like, yeah, that's obviously, there's abilities and all of that, but there's also, differences as well. But what he actually says in this Reddit thread is that, Overwatch design choices appeared in Hi-Rez's own Paladin's predecessor, Global Agenda, first.
Mm-hmm.
But then other ideas were inspired by Overwatch and Paladin's shared ancestor, which is Valve's popular Team Fortress 2. So they all seem to be drawing some gameplay or storyline or ability sort of things from these other games.
So they're quote unquote inspired by other games. Okay. Well, okay, that's interesting. So I like most Blizzard games. I'm a huge fan of Blizzard. The first game I ever played online was Diablo 1. And I played tons of StarCraft, Diablo 2, Diablo 3, World of Warcraft. I mean, I love their stuff. But, to be fair, and as much as I love them, they've never been known as being original. What they've always been kind of known as is they took a genre that existed, and they took the best parts of every game, the best ideas, and they made the best game in that genre. So, so it's kind of interesting that a lot of the fans are going to make that conclusion because that's kind of what Blizzard's always done. They again took inspiration, which I don't have a problem with. As a consumer, we want the best games we can get, and if a company's willing to say, hey, I like what that game did and this game, let's put it all together in one good game, why not?
Well, and then whatever the actual differences between the games, this article on Eurogamer.net, it positions itself as an Overwatch-esque title, but a Steam-based version. So I think that's really what it comes down to, because it's Steam, then it's free with microtransactions, whereas Overwatch has, the subscription-based, like Blizzard through Battle.net.
Well, and how you actually buy it.
Mm-hmm.
So that's also interesting because when I played Overwatch, I'll fully admit I do not actively play Overwatch. I actually really liked the game. I played the beta, and I remember playing it with Mike, and I was like, hey, this is really great. And then I thought to myself, but I don't see the appeal and the length of stay per like gameplay per hour on a game I had to pay for. I flat out said myself, this feels like a free-to-play game that I'm getting charged for. And so again, it's not a bad game. I think it's really interesting, and I'm like, oh, it's cool, and it's obviously got a bunch of fans, and there's a lot of hype. But I kind of felt that way. I felt like, well, it should have been a free-to-play game. In fact, I don't know why it isn't. When something like Heroes of the Storm is free-to-play and you buy characters, like, it seems like that would be the smartest thing for them to do. And isn't it, adding on top of that, I mean, Overwatch hasn't been out long enough for clone games to have started coming out.
Right, that's a really good point.
I mean, the games, the amount of time that these games take, it really bothers me because now this isn't Blizzard coming out and saying this. Like if someone from Blizzard came out and said, you know what, this game copied us, we want to take it down, all this other stuff, I'd be like way more attacking Blizzard. But they aren't. They didn't say it. This is a fan overreaction, and really the story we're talking about is the co-founder of Hi-Rez, his response to it, which I think he handled pretty well. Now, did I read that article right? Like, he actually broke down the total skills, right, for like every game. Okay, yeah. I got to hear this.
It's Overwatch is advanced. It has 100 abilities compared to Paladin's 85. But about 42 abilities are very similar between Overwatch and Paladins, and 36 of these abilities were previously in Global Agenda or Tribes Ascend. 6 abilities were seen in Overwatch before Paladins. And his post on Reddit actually contains dozens of links to support his claims that, hey guys, we didn't rip off Overwatch. We created our standalone game, available through Steam. We seem to have used the same sort of beginnings as inspiration, but it's still a completely different game.
Yeah, that's really interesting to me too, because when they talk about the skills that are being, copied or whatever, it's stuff like, this guy has a move that makes him stealth for 10 seconds. Well, hasn't that been in every game that's had abilities since forever? I mean, like,
at least if you had like a rogue or something like that.
Right. I mean, and there's like one where it's like, well, this one makes him shoot in all directions for so much. Okay, well, if a guy had 2 guns, it's not unbelievable that his move would be to run around and shoot a bunch of guys really quickly, or to snipe in and like slow everything down and have an ultimate shot that goes. Like, even Smite, there's a god that has she bends down and she shoots an arrow and it locks onto a target automatically and hits him anywhere in the map through anything.
Oh,
so like
that seems a little OP.
Yeah, and it stuns them too. It's kind of like a kill shot, It's
Jeez.
supposed to be one of those things like someone's almost getting away and you're like, not in my house. Okay, so he stood up for himself, and I guess the thing I would more say is, as fans, we gotta like be better than that, Like, for one, a lot of companies take inspiration from others. I'm not going to say stuff like copy and rip off, because there are legitimate cases of companies ripping off assets from other companies, and so it's totally wrong. When a game looks at another game and says, I love that game, I want to do it our way, I have no problem with that. And especially when it's a good game and it's a good company trying to make another good game, and they took the Overwatch model, if you want to say that, I won't say that, but say they took, they have that Overwatch style, but it's free. It's it's free to play, so it's already totally different, and it's looking for a different crowd, perhaps. So I don't know. I don't have a problem with it. I just think it's interesting that the person didn't feel attacked, as we'll get to in our main story today. There's a right way and a wrong way.
Yes.
There's a right way and wrong way for a developer to act when feeling maybe defensive about being attacked. This one was handled right. He came out with some facts and just defended his company.
It's very well done and very professional, which I appreciate. It wasn't a, an anger-fueled situation.
Yeah.
Which,
cool.
Speaking of sort of trying to react to things about what other people are saying, about things that you've created, Hideo Kojima, who is most famously known for Metal Gear.
And probably
only Metal Gear.
my favorite game designer of all time. Like, he is just my favorite, so let's throw that out there. So he's my guy. I'm looking right now at my closet in our studio, quote unquote studio in our office, and I have a closet full of Metal Gear stuff. I've got multiple $500 Metal Gear statues. I've got all the Play Arts Metal Gears. Okay, so anyway, that's my boy, Hideo Kojima. That's my guy.
So what he obviously left, I believe it's Kojima Productions, is that right? Or no, that's his...
Well, he left Konami,
Konami,
but he had his own. He had his own
another.
studio, Kojima Productions, and he was able, since it's his name, to keep that name.
That actually.
So
makes
his new studio is essentially the same name.
Okay,
Yep.
You're right, Konami. I'm sorry about that, but not a part of the story. But he was asked about Metal Gear Survive, which is a zombie-infested game. Now, since he's left, he hasn't had anything to do with the Metal Gear franchise.
Right. Which we didn't talk about Metal Gear Survive on here. One, because it's kind of old news by now. But two, because we really want to try to stay positive on this show. Like, like my angle, right? So, like, I love a lot of YouTubers out there, and I love what they're doing. But so much of it is, like, hate and anger. And that works, and that's fun to watch sometimes. But it's not what I want to do. I want to do a more positive show. You know, I want to be upbeat about the great parts of this awesome hobby that we love. And if I do topics like talking about Metal Gear Survive, I can't do that. So there's going to be topics sometimes where people are like, oh, I wonder why I didn't cover that. Probably because I can't stay positive while talking about that. And I don't want to talk about things that are negative all the time. Metal Gear Survive, it's like just jabbing me in the side. And so we're not going to talk about Metal Gear Survive, or that's why we have not talked about it. So
Sure. Well, he was asked about Metal Gear Survive being so heavily involved in it, and essentially he said, well, Metal Gear was always about political fiction, it was always about espionage. Where do zombies fit into Metal Gear Survive? Because that apparently is one of the main storylines of that game.
Yeah, and so, like, I normally will side with Kojima like 99.9% of the time when it comes to him and Konami and all that stuff. However, it's not that far-fetched for his universe. In Metal Gear Solid 5, there was the vocal cord parasites, which essentially, like, zombified certain people in such a way. So, like, he explained it in a scientific manner, but it's not that far-fetched. I mean, they talk about nanomachines, they've brought people back that just, you know, it's, okay, he's a little ridiculous to say it's got no place, but I agree that he normally sets more of, like, a political overtone with his. Like, he's telling a story about war and about, you know, fighting and soldiers, and this is like, well, Konami's like, we spent so much money on this engine, we only made one game with it, so let's just put another game on it that, you know, has great gameplay, which will probably still be fun to play. Just I don't know why they had to put the Metal Gear name on it, which I do know because they want to sell copies. But
I would disagree, only because I watched you play Metal Gear 5. I don't think adding zombies to that would make it any better of a game.
Yeah, I completely agree. And as you know, that was my favorite Metal Gear game play-wise, and the worst one story-wise. And that's even the one directed by Mr. Kojima-san himself. So, I mean, you know, there's no excuse for that. You can argue that maybe time got cut short, which I do believe is true, but he had run through a bunch of delays already. I mean, you can't just have endless money flowing in and not wonder where it's coming from, you know. And I love the guy, and he makes quality stuff, but he's got to work for a company that's willing to give him that time. And that game felt rushed, you know.
It really did, and you could tell with just the storyline. Because before the game came out, we speculated a lot about how they would tie all the storylines together.
Yep. I made you listen on that car ride to Milwaukee. I made you listen to 2 hours of me telling you the entire Metal Gear saga, which I just loved every minute of it. And looking back, I can't believe that you even didn't open the door and just combat roll out of the car. But I was watching the trailers, and I was like, oh, I'll bet you this is this, and I got fully into it. I was dissecting the trailers. I actually put some trailer breakdowns on YouTube that got pulled down for copyright strikes, of course. You know, but I did some of that, and it was great, you know, and so I really got into it. But yeah, you know.
Well, another funny aspect of this is that Yoji Shinkawa, who was most famous for his environmental character mechanical designs for Zombie Gear and Zone of the Ender series, was quoted as saying, well, if I had worked on that game, I would put mechs in it.
This is one of my favorite parts of this article because it's a literal translation to Japanese. So I'm sure someone asked him, you know, hey, what would you have done differently? And he's like, well, if I had made this game, there would be mechs in it. I don't think there's much of a story here, but I find it really funny because you can totally take it that way.
Right.
And you could be like, yeah, this dude's kind of yeah, of course if I made this game, there'd be mechs in it, duh. Because I'm the mech guy.
I'm the mech guy.
But yeah, if you look, I don't think I have any easily available. But
well, I mean, the mechanics and the characters and all of that is just insanely, like, just, they're intricate and detailed.
Yeah, so this is his art style. So I'm holding right now, I pulled out the Zone of the Enders HD Collector's Edition, which has this really awesome Yoji artwork on it. I don't know what's up with the Ender having that huge donger there, but
it is a little
it's very
odd.
Strange. But anyway, he's an amazing artist, and so they didn't even try to bring him back. Like, there's all these really interesting things about this story too. Like, Konami was pretty much just like, whatever Metal Gear team isn't like our guy who we hired, and he's a Kojima guy, like, just, we don't want him. Like, just get out of here. We'll do it on our own. So, I don't know. But I like his. If I had worked on that game, it would have had mechs in it. Okay?
It's kind of like an illustrator. An illustrator loves drawing a certain type of thing. You know, some people like drawing, the female form or mechanical things. He likes drawing mechs, why not?
That's it. Just wants to draw mechs. All right, cool.
All right. Let's talk about the Nintendo NX.
Okay.
Now, fans are thirsty.
That is the understatement of the year.
Fans are thirsty. In fact, one thing that I wanted to talk about before we talk about the actual article is that there is a subreddit that's devoted entirely to the Nintendo NX.
Oh, sure.
And fans are so thirsty that they've even created a calendar to show possible reveal dates drawn from some questionable methodologies. This is from a Polygon article that came out today, that, they're getting thirsty, and they have this calendar of, okay, there's no chance of reveal here because Nintendo doesn't operate on weekends, and they're not going to reveal the Nintendo NX on a Monday or a Friday because it wouldn't be at the beginning or the end of a week, and it wouldn't necessarily ever be on a holiday.
Okay.
They're speculating that they're going to release some design or have a reveal of the Nintendo NX console, if you can call it that, tomorrow, the 23rd, because it's actually Nintendo's 127th birthday, I believe. But people are not holding their breath.
That's dumb. Like, I don't have a nicer way of saying it.
It could happen.
It could, but Nintendo doesn't do that. Like, they build hype. They want to make an event. They'll do one of their Nintendo Directs. They'll announce it. They'll want people watching the live stream and stuff like that. So, like, they won't just, like, not say anything and then all of a sudden tomorrow just release a press thing. Oh, here's all the Nintendo NX stuff, and they'll dump it. I mean, they're going to do, like, a show of it, and they'll have the Nintendo Direct where it's, like, in your face, like, boom, here it is. We're going to, look at it, so awesome. And they're going to have some custom stuff running on it, so we all just get all amped up like we always do, so.
Well, the reason why we're bringing this up is that Pokemon executive was recently interviewed and talked a little bit about the Nintendo NX. And he says, quote, "The NX is trying to change the concept of what it means to be a home console device or a handheld device." All he's confirming is that there's Pokemon games. So everybody's happy about that. But what does that even mean? It's not quite a home console, and it's not quite a handheld device. It's somewhere in the middle.
Yeah.
Is this going to be another Wii U?
So everyone got really excited because he's like, we're bringing Pokemon games to the NX, and everyone's like, oh yeah, that's the story. And I'm like, well, wait a minute. Duh, because it's a Nintendo. So like that's so strange to me. Like,
but
of course.
But it makes it seem like it's going to be a more handheld device.
Right. That's the interesting part about this article, right? So he says it's going to... What was that quote again? The NX is trying to change the concept of what it means to be a home console device or a handheld device. Now, if you mix that with a couple of the other things, like Breath of the Wild, the new Zelda game, has been in the copyright. They've been talking about how it's going to be both disc and cartridge based, which is interesting. So they've talked about that. Personally, I think this could be the best idea they've ever had. And I'm not a huge Nintendo supporter. I'm not a huge Nintendo lover. Like, I have a Wii U. I actually really enjoy it. I think it's one of their best systems since the Super Nintendo.
You really think so?
I do. I like the Wii U. I like a lot of the games on it. We just don't play it very often because there's not a lot of games on it. It's just how it goes.
Well, the thing that I don't like how large this is. Like, I have a small frame. I have small hands. It's bulky. It's difficult. Okay. And, like, I don't know where I'm supposed to hold it. And I don't know if I should be looking at the tiny monitor on the console or whatever. Is it a device or is
that's
it
the
a
controller? That's the controller. That's
I don't
the
know
Wii
if I
U
should
gamepad.
look down there. I should look at the gamepad, or I should look at the TV. Sometimes it's the same, and it's all very disorienting for me. So I struggle with the Wii U.
Well, and this brings up a good point that I want to talk about anyway, right? So what I like about having us both on the show is that I am really into this stuff. Like, clearly I'm doing a podcast because I feel like I know what I'm talking about. Obviously, in my line of work, owning a game store, I know what I'm doing. And then I very briefly made my own game with a few friends. It was awful. We went through that whole process. So I love the game industry. I love it. But with you are a gamer. Like there's no ifs, ands about it. You're not like some fake gamer or anything. But it doesn't consume you like it consumes me.
Well, no, and it doesn't. I mean, you could trace back my love of video games from what, I watched my brother play, the first Zelda game on the original Nintendo system. And gosh, what was that? 1989, 88, something like that. I mean, I remember
80. Well, Zelda, like 85.
Well,
maybe that's not when you watched it, but I'm saying that's when it came out.
That's probably that maybe it. But anyway, I mean, I remember the day he got it. It was Christmas Day, and my mom hid it in the tree, and it was the gold cartridge, and it was fantastic. And we spent the rest of Christmas morning watching him play, and my mom loved it when Link actually died because he's doodle-doo-doodle-doo-doodle-doo. And he just disappeared from existence.
Yeah, well, and to your point too, like, and you are a total dork, right?
Yeah,
just
that's
like
true.
me, like we're both total dorks. Last night, date night was Back to the Future in the theater.
Back to the Future.
Our favorite movie, right?
So
we're total dorks, and you love video games, and you play them. You're playing South Park, you played Fallout 4, but you don't play as much. Like, so you're not as in the blog. Like, you're not reading this news every day like me. Like, I'm sending you articles saying, like, hey, check this out. But it's not, and I love the fact that we have these two different viewpoints. Mm-hmm. So I want people to know that, so they're not like, man, she even know what year Zelda came out. It's like, well, that's okay. It's okay that I do and you don't, but it's a different perspective.
Right.
Because I'm looking out from inside, and you get to look at it from the outside, and it's kind of neat, I think it's a good thing.
I'm the retail consumer, as it were.
You would be like the general consumer, so you're kind of processing this news with a different set of eyes. Like, I can kind of read between the lines and say, well, I know this company does this, I know this, I'll bet you they do this, and you're looking at it and you take a lot of it at face value because that's the level that you're at with the products. I think it's kind of cool. So anyway, I want to touch on that so that when we're talking about that, so if the NX is what we hope it is, it's going to be a hybrid home console and handheld. Something like a handheld device that you can take with you and play like a DS or whatever, and then you come home, you dock it into a station, and then you pick up a controller and you play it at home. Now, what I love about this is I've never been a handheld guy. So growing up, I never had a Game Boy, never got a Game Boy Advance or anything, so I have zero attachment whatsoever to handheld gaming. I know, right? It's weird, but
I had a Game Boy and a Game Boy Color and a Nintendo DS.
Well, what's funny about that is we didn't take a lot of trips. We didn't do a lot of that stuff where I needed it, like in the car. We just didn't do that. So I have a love of the home console. It's just what I love. So I never, as I grew up, I didn't play things like Pokemon. I know it sounds crazy, and like people listening to this are gonna be like, "Oh man, this dude doesn't even like Pokemon." I just never played them. I respect the series, but I just never got hooked on it.
My sister played Pokemon.
Okay.
Because she was the right age range for it. She was a couple years younger than I was when it came out. I mean, I watched the cartoon, and I've played Pokemon, but I wasn't as in-depth about it. But here's the problem that I have with that. If you have, and maybe the technology is advanced now, but I worry that, like, okay, so you've got a laptop. Laptops are powerful to a point. They can't be technically as powerful as like a tower or a gaming CPU or anything like that.
Limitations based on size.
I would worry that a handheld Nintendo NX device wouldn't be as powerful as something like the Wii or the Wii U because it's compact.
Well, we've seen, like, the PlayStation Vita is a great example. So that's really good hardware. It uses these little mini discs. The Vita carts are very small, super thin, and the game's full 3D. They look great. So I'm not too worried about that because Nintendo doesn't really focus on has to look the best and be the best graphic. They've always kind of made their style, right? So I don't have a problem with that. What I love, though, about this idea is that I love playing handheld games, just not on a handheld. I would love to play the Pokemon games on my TV. And in the past, there's been devices to do that, right? So on the GameCube, we had the Game Boy player. So I could pop in any Game Boy Advance game into my GameCube with the player and the disc and play them on my TV. So if this does that, I missed out on so many good DS and 3DS games because I just wasn't interested in playing in a handheld when I have a nice big TV in the living room. Which has always been my thing. And then again, that doesn't mean that people who play handhelds are wrong or that people who love handhelds, are incorrect in feeling way. They're totally correct. But for me, I'm excited to be able to play those games that I wasn't able to play before. And going to the Pokemon point, if this is true and it is a handheld hybrid, we'll get the best Pokemon games they make on essentially a home console.
Well, do you think that they could enter, like, okay, so you've got the Nintendo DS, which you can link to other Nintendo DSs. Do you think that they might do something like how Pokemon Go, you can connect to people through your phone, that they would create a Pokemon handheld game for the Nintendo NX that you could use like a DS, but then also if you don't choose to go out and talk to people or interact, if you want to be that person who plays inside, which there's nothing wrong with. I've been both the handheld and the console video game player. Mm-hmm. Could they do something like that? Like, is that kind of where they're going? And Pokemon Go was kind of the stepping stone.
Well, I think Go was a totally different beast. That was to capture a new market. Use an established franchise to test out a new idea, which actually really isn't a new idea. Niantic had basically the same kind of game, except you're like a hacker or whatever. But the idea though is that if you look back on the consoles, we had games like Pokemon Snap, Pokemon Stadium. On GameCube, you had Pokemon Coliseum, Pokemon XD, Gale of Darkness. So these are games that were not traditional Pokemon games. They were essentially spin-offs, and they were okay in their own right because they were Pokemon, but they weren't really good games. And like, I know I'm gonna get killed for that. Like, people are gonna be like, "What are you talking about, dude? I love Pokemon Snap." Of course you do, because you played when you were younger, and it's fun. We have the Pokemon Snap station at the store.
Hey, it's cute. You can take a picture of a Pikachu.
It's cute. Not knocking the game, but the best part about Pokemon is it's essentially a turn-based RPG. Right?
Which
I love too. So that experience was only available to people who had the handhelds and then the few devices, like I was saying, where you could play them on the Game Boy Advance. So now they're going to make those games for both the home console essentially and the handheld device because they're the same system. So basically the games that were only available as handhelds are now coming back to us and saying, hey, if you want to play it at home, you can play it at home on your big TV. And that's what I love about the idea, if that's what we get. Again, still speculation until we officially hear word, but
I mean, I could get behind that if the technology is advanced enough to not make it a big, bulky Wii U type gamepad. I am not going to carry something like that around.
Yeah, that's a good point. That's a really fair point too. And if the detachable part is like just a tablet with no buttons or analog sticks or D-pads on it, like forget it. I mean, no. I'm not gonna play it portably anyway though. So it'll still be okay for me, but I think that would be a big miss.
Oh, that would be the worst. If it was just essentially just an iPad. Bleh.
Yeah, which yeah, exactly. Right. but it was neat though that a Pokemon executive just was talking about the NX, essentially revealing things that Nintendo themselves hadn't been saying yet.
But, I mean, I think it was kind of in the grapevine. I remember reading an article where Nintendo talked about how it was going to be kind of a hybrid and bring together two types of market. So I think the Pokemon executive didn't spill too much, but it got people thirsty again for what did he tell us? Is there some way we can extrapolate more details from what he said? Because they're so under the covers. And they've actually done a ridiculously good job not leaking anything.
There was
I'm impressed.
There was a big leak like a month or two ago that, like, I think it was a month ago or so. I think it was Eurogamer actually. Someone had like an article up where it was like, we have facts, it's for sure a handheld hybrid home console, but there was no proof to back it up.
Right.
So we're like waiting to hear, but and video game journalism, I mean, it is what it is. It's not held to the same standards as regular journalism, so they can post stuff like that in the site without having verified multiple sources and stuff like that. So it is what it is, and we'll take it with a grain of salt.
All right. Yeah. And if you want to know more about that thirsty, go to Reddit. I believe it's actually just Reddit/Nintendo NX. I'm pretty sure. All right. This brings us to our top story, Greg.
Oh, the top story. This is a good one. I'm so excited for this.
Okay. Main story. Steam our lovely, lovely web-based...
Love Steam.
Love Steam.
Steam's amazing.
They removed all the games from Studio Digital Homicide because they were, quote, being hostile to customers. Mm-hmm. But now, Studio Digital Homicide is trying to sue a bunch of people. Now, why would you think they would want to sue a bunch of people? They stole proprietary information.
Sure, possibly. Did they?
They embezzled money.
Oh man, that'd be worth suing somebody over. Sure.
None of those things. They left bad reviews.
Oh, that's the worst of them all. How dare you play our bad game and tell us it's bad?
In fact, the company is currently suing the internet star Jim Sterling because his videos show his opinions of the games that they make, and his opinions are not great.
So I wish I had been able to play this for you over the last couple of days. There's so many layers of this, right? So here's the story we want to talk about, but we have to go back and back and back. So eventually we'll wrap it all around. So the main story is that Steam, right? So Valve's like, hey, there's this company. They're starting to sue people over bad reviews. We're just going to take all their games off the store. We don't want to deal with a company like this that's, in their own words, hostile to its customers. I think that's pretty fair. You know, I mean, Steam has to protect themselves. Or Valve, I should say. I keep calling them Steam. Steam's the platform. Valve has to protect themselves. So the reason that these guys, so Digital Homicide, I don't even know if it's like it's technically a parent company to the actual studio that makes these games. Whatever. Digital Homicide is what people will recognize when we say that. So Digital Homicide started suing customers based on negative things they said. Now, I will be the first to admit, some of the stuff that people wrote and some of the people they're trying to go after said some really horrible things. So he's not wrong in being upset. Like,
well,
some
what
of these,
kind of horrible things?
I mean, we're talking like death threats and stuff like, you know, all the people that made this game should die, stuff like that. Like
See, that's just rude.
It's bad taste. It's very bad taste. And the internet gets, we as the internet, like, it gets away from us sometimes. Like, there's bad pockets, just like anything. You know, it's not everybody, but there's these bad pockets of negative people. And a lot of times I think they say that stuff to be funny, and they don't realize like the impact that stuff can have, right? So I don't blame them. And apparently they reported certain users to Steam, and some Steam users got banned and some didn't, you know, for saying these horrible things. Right. I think they should get banned for saying stuff like that.
I think so too. If they're making threats of a physical or violent nature, no.
Absolutely. And so, you know, if you've got that sort of stuff happening, Valve needs to provide a safe environment for its developers too. I think that's fair to say. So I'm not going to jump on them about the suing them thing. Really, the story wasn't to jump on anybody, but this goes really deep. So, as you mentioned earlier, Jim Sterling. So he does Jimquisition. He used to be on Destructoid for a while. Really funny guy. I don't know him personally, but I like his stuff. Very funny. And so he did a video that basically was what he calls like a first play or first impression or something. And he plays one of Digital Homicide's games. I don't remember the name of it. I was just looking at it yesterday. And he just shits, you know, he just doesn't like it. You know, he just kind of craps all over it and whatever. And so then one of the co-founders of Digital Homicide takes his video, re-uploads it with his own captions over it, basically making fun of Jim's first play of the game, which is really entertaining if you watch it. And it wasn't that bad a video. It was actually kind of funny. So, you know, if he doesn't make games more, he's got a future in that. And this is a long time ago. This is like 1.5 years ago or something. This is all happening. So then, then Jim takes that video, re-uploads that video with his commentary over that. I mean, it's just awesome. It's really, really funny. You know, to me, it's really comical. And so then later, and this is the part I wanted you to hear. We didn't get to this. So like, on YouTube, Jim Sterling somehow gets this guy onto Skype to chat with him, and he basically says they want to do a breakdown. I think if I'm being honest, I think Jim knew he was gonna like say ridiculous things, and he wanted it all recorded so he could make a video of it and make him look foolish.
Somebody who's hot-headed will be hot-headed.
And so there's like, it's like 1.5 hours long, and it's some of the cringiest stuff you ever watch. It's full of drama, it's full of hilarity, and it's full of cringe, because there's so many moments where like this guy's trying to defend something, and he's trying to like, haha, I gotcha kind of moments, you know, comparing apples to oranges, and it's really kind of painful. And what I wanted to talk about with this story a little bit is I can really understand where the guy from Digital Homicide is coming from. And I apologize, I don't have his name. I don't really care.
I'll find it for you.
You know, I understand where he's coming from. I'm really bad at taking criticism. I'll be the first to admit that. Like, I'm really bad at it. Like, I try really hard on things, and when people critique it, even if it's positive reinforcement or if it's a healthy criticism, it's hard not to take it personally. This guy clearly is trying to do this for a living, and he's trying to be passionate about it. And he's, so when someone badmouths his stuff, it upsets him.
He takes it very personally.
And no one would ever give you a hard time for taking an insult personally, right? However, it's how you deal with that, right? So if you look at the people that are attacking you, which are essentially your customers and people that are going to support you, if you look at them and then you start saying stuff and you start attacking them and saying how they're wrong, you're going to lose. And whether he's right or not, because there's talk about how fans of Jim Sterling were like going to the Digital Homicide forums and trashing the game there, and they were leaving reviews for games they hadn't played, stuff like that, right? Mm-hmm. So that's all bad. Is that Jim Sterling's fault? I mean, come on. I mean, no, we're better than that. Like, there's no excuse for that. The people doing it are at fault, right? But like, that's where he kind of got offended. So then, a sadder part of the story is he decides he wants to sue Jim Sterling. I just think it's a terrible idea. Like,
what a terrible idea.
Whether he's right or not and justified in the fact that he was legitimately harassed, like I think he was, what are you doing? I mean, that's just bad press, It's like that story a couple weeks ago from the Video Game Exchange in Madison, where it's just bad press, and like, you're not going to win. In the store, right? If I argue with a customer, whether I'm right or not, I lose.
Yes.
I will not win that argument. It doesn't matter if I'm right or not. It's not about being right or wrong. It's about winning and losing the argument, or winning and losing the customer, the situation, and you're going to lose every time if you argue. So I understand where he's coming from. Being somebody who made a game once, an awful game that was boring and not fun to play, but we put a lot of work into it. We dedicated a lot of man hours to it. We had a great idea. We weren't talented enough to make the game vision that we saw originally, and it came out and it wasn't good. But I'm the first person to say that. If I come out and say that, I really can't get offended if someone comes up to me and says, dude, I played your game and it's awful. I'm like, yeah, sorry I made you play it. It's awful. So I understand his point of view there too, but again, it's all how you deal with that. And I just think you really handled it incorrectly. So, it's kind of sad too, because, he started like an Indiegogo, a GoFundMe?
GoFundMe, I think.
He starts a GoFundMe to raise money to sue him. I mean, it's all bad press. It's all bad moves. And sometimes you gotta be able to curb that.
There's actually a really good article that Kotaku released yesterday. Steam's Digital Homicide fiasco is Valve's fault.
Okay.
It's by Nathan Grayson, and I want to read this little excerpt that might be something that kind of goes along with what you were saying about the developers versus the consumer.
Mm-hmm.
Steam developers often face audiences who are hostile by default. Honest mistakes or tough creative decisions or chaos born of that unwranglable bull known as game development, these things are interpreted as signs of purposeful malice, and a massive scale rage often follows. Sometimes it's constrained to Steam reviews and forums. Other times it leaks out to Twitter and other social media. Digital Homicide, awful though they were, claimed they even received a bag of feces in the mail.
That's not funny.
That's horrible.
I'm gonna giggle because you said feces.
Oh, Jesus.
But that's not funny. I mean, that's atrocious. Okay. So
the article's like, what do the developers do to mitigate this? They want to put their games in a public place where they can get downloaded and make a little bit of money on a per game transaction, and they're getting ripped apart for honest mistakes. But that's the problem with the internet and people on the internet. I love the internet. I hate all the people on the internet.
I mean, yeah, right. And here's where they went wrong as well, right? So if you're going to make games that are mediocre and kind of bad, and they do rush out a lot of games, and it's what they do, own it. right? You know how many people come to the store and they want to buy Superman 64 or E.T. because they're like the worst game. I read on the internet this is the worst game. Like,
it's a landfill game.
Every time somebody buys E.T., they're like, I've heard this is the worst game ever. And I'm like, okay, well, it's not. I mean, it's not. It's not bad game. It is not good at all. In my opinion, it's not fun. It's too hard. They don't explain anything. It's inconsistent. Whatever. A million reasons. Not going to review it. Don't care enough to do that. However, I can appreciate that people want to play things because they're bad. There's a market for that. I had someone coming in who bought that and Superman 64 and like BioFreaks on N64, and they were like, oh man, I just want to get all these really bad games I've heard about. Which makes sense because there's a lot of YouTubers out there that like they made a living off like complaining about games or calling out bad games. So it's like, okay, you're going to do that. You could own that, right? So Digital Homicide could be like, you want to play the worst game of 2014, or something like put up a big thing, like bragging about how we were voted, and five websites voted us the worst game of 2014. Do you have the guts to play it or something? You could turn that around. There's more people that would play it for that reason, and when you kind of make fun of yourself, it's like, you know, when you're getting picked on, if you kind of edge yourself a little bit.
And you agree with them. Yeah, I'm a piece of crap.
I mean, well, that's yikes. Wow, I don't know where you just.
I don't remember. I blocked it all from my memory.
Jeez, what happened to you in high school? We'll talk about that later. But with me though, it's like, you know, being in high school, always being a little overweight, you know, like I can make like the being heavy joke first, and then when someone else is like, yeah, you're heavy, I'm like, yeah, dude, I just said that.
Like,
and then he looks kind of dumb, you know, like, and you kind of become the class clown, and you know, and everything. So they could have done that. They could have turned it, and instead of taking everything personally, they could have owned it. And while doing that, they could have kept working on their games, right? Because I think his games are getting better, and if you make a lot of games, they eventually get better because you get better. I mean, that's how practice works. You know?
Right. It's like anything that you learn how to do. I mean, I don't think that there's two sides to this, obviously. There's the consumer side of me that wants to say, well, I would really like to play nice and good games and games that are fulfilling, but I don't usually play games like Candy Crush where you get no sense of fulfillment and you're just kind of struggling and frustrated because they make you wait 72 hours before you can get to the next phase. That happens. I mostly stick with, you know, RPGs and games that have very defined storylines where things happen, and it's like watching a novel unfold before your very eyes. So I'm usually not like the kind of person that plays, what was that, Super Meat Boy?
Yep.
Was that the right name?
That's a great game.
Like, to me, I get no sense of fulfillment out of that game. Like, it's ridiculously hard, and you get shredded up, and you leave little blood stains all over the place. But I'm not going to go to the website of wherever that was downloaded from and say, you guys are pieces of shit because this game's too flippin' hard. I don't want to play this game. You guys are crap. Like, I'm not that kind of person. But then again, I'm not the internet.
Well, and there are people like that, sadly. And so it's the environment you have to live in. So, like, if you're ever going to get into game design, if anybody listening to this ever decides to want to make a game, you have to understand the environment you're going into. They're uber critical. They're, you know, your fans will turn on you in a second, and they have high expectations and low tolerance for mistakes, which can push you to be better, or it can drive you mental.
Right, it can crush you.
Yeah, I mean, and so I understand what I actually really... This story wasn't to be like, Digital Homicide, man, they're the worst. I mean, I wish I could be like a PR guy for them, because I'd love to be like, hey, we can fix your public image, man. let's do this. Let's fix this. But they can handle it right, but they got to stop with nonsense lawsuits. They just have to be like, look, and that was part of the issue too, is they were falsely flagging some of Jim Sterling's videos using.
See, that's just
and they're using YouTube's kind of broken reporting system. They were using that, and his videos, I believe, got reinstated, which is nice. But when you watch that, like when you listen to that Skype call, we'll listen to the highlights of it because I listened to it again the other day, and it was a riot. It was great. But he says things like how he's really upset that game reviewers get to take all this footage from their game and then make money off of their hard work. And all I can think to myself is, he's showing your game to thousands, tens of thousands to hundreds of thousands of people. So it's the same thing like when Nintendo wants to pull down, you know, YouTube videos of people that are playing their games and stuff. It's like, how do they not understand the power of marketing? As a creator, the number one thing you want is your product in the customer's hands. So yeah, it's kind of like the old complaint when developers were arguing about the issue with used games. You know, it's like, but if people play your game and it's good, eventually they're gonna buy your stuff new.
Well, I don't think it's not necessarily the fact that a YouTube person was using snippets of their game in videos that they were making. I think it's all about intent. You know, those Nintendo videos that people make are like fan tributes, and they're using proprietary and like characters and all of that, and they're not meaning any harm. They're just like, I love this game, I'm gonna make a fan video, it's gonna be great, I'm gonna set it to, you know, Don't Stop Me Now, and it's gonna be great, and then it gets taken down and reported. To me, that seems less of a good experience for the user, because like, well, it's copyright infringement, you can't do it. But then you've got somebody who's taking your game and saying, look at this game is a piece of shit. It's like, yeah, you might be exposing that game to thousands of people, but it's not in the way that you want that game presented. Like, I wouldn't want something that I worked hours and hours and hours on, somebody to rip apart and say, look how horrible this game is, and you should feel thankful that I showed your game on my video.
Well, I think there's extremes both ways, but like Nintendo was even pulling down videos of people just playing their games, like doing you know, like long plays and stuff, and it's like, you know, it's just bad PR, you know, really. Yeah. And there's no copyright strikes against that, you know, like there's not one. It is fair use, and you could argue how fair use is being understood and stuff like that, but that's the law of the land as it is now. And so if people are making a living off that, like, and that's what my issue was with him, is he's kind of arguing with Jim Sterling over, you know, well, you know, you're making all this money off of my hard work. And you know, Jim's argument is like, but I'm doing something entertaining with your work, you know, and they're talking about, well, it's a different medium for movies and all sorts of stuff. But the guy was trying to like trap Jim Sterling in like this, you know, he was trying to trap him in this, I got you moment, and you're wrong and I'm right. And it's like, you're continuing an argument that you've already lost when you started it. And he's just dragging it out and somehow making it worse, you know, when you need to own it and just move on from it.
Well, and I agree, and I don't think he should have agreed to have a Skype call anyway. And I think
that was a terrible idea.
The whole thing has been blown way out of proportion, and people are going back and forth, and it's just escalating and escalating and escalating. And I mean, could you say that it's Valve's fault for all of this because they should be more stringent about their policies of commenting or whatever it might be? Mm-hmm. You could make that argument. I don't know if it would necessarily solve the problem, because even something like Reddit, which is very, you know, user-oriented content and everything, you can downvote stuff and everything, and, you know, you've got something that's a completely, like, innocent post that, like, okay, somebody posted a picture, he's got a little kitten on his shoulder, and he and the kitten are like leaning. They almost kind of look like they're italicized.
Okay.
And the comment was, oh, look, you know, I don't remember the cat's name. The kitten was like, look, Fluffy wants to say hi to the Reddit audience. And the original poster had to disconnect or disable the comments because so many people were trashing him for making the post. Mm-hmm. It's like, how can you possibly misconstrue a teenager who's probably no more than 18 with a kitten on his shoulder? Like, how does this work?
And let's be honest. I mean, there's a lot of people, probably no one listening to this channel because they've already moved on, because it's not dramatic enough and not exciting enough, but there's a lot of people that feed off that negative energy, you know, and that's why I'm glad that, like, we talk about it a little bit, but that's why we have our show here. Like, we want to be kind of like a beacon of positivity, mm-hmm. and just talk about things. Like, we're educated people, want to talk to other educated people in a realistic sense, you know, and just talk about it the way they are. And unfortunately, though, there are huge pockets of the internet that aren't like that. Ugh. And so you've got YouTube comment sections where horrible things are said. It really comes down to the fact that you're completely anonymous on the internet. Nothing you say has repercussions. So maybe if Valve would implement something with repercussions, then like if your account got banned because you were saying really horrible stuff like that, and you had 100 Steam games that you paid a couple $1,000 for, you might think twice before doing that again.
Right.
There has to be consequences for your actions, and the internet, that's the with the great part about it being free speech, being able to say whatever you want, that's the trade-off, is you're going to have that sort of stuff. Or do you start to have companies be responsible? Like free speech doesn't mean you get to say whatever you want without consequence.
Right.
And this isn't going to go on a political rant here, but it doesn't mean that. It means that the government can't prosecute you for saying things, whatever you want to say.
It's all about the image that you want
Right.
to put forth. Like if you want, if Valve wants Steam and the Steam platform to be a not necessarily family friendly, but constructive
Right.
sort of website, they have it within their power.
Mm-hmm.
They just have to figure out what their code of conduct is, what their vision or mission is for being that type of company. I don't like to read comments on YouTube videos for that very reason, because it makes me really uncomfortable to see what some people would say under the anonymity of the internet.
Well, and we like to interact with people. Like, we want to give out our Twitter handles and stuff. We want to give out, we want to have YouTube comments so we can chat with you guys. But when does it get to the point where it's invasive?
Right.
And I'm honestly not name dropping here. I know Pro Jared very well. You do too.
Mm-hmm.
We're very close to him actually, and I get to spend time with him. And when I'm spending time with him, to watch people and how the boundaries they cross, and how familiar they get, and how really kind of creepy it gets. It's a little discerning when you're somebody like us who just wants to kind of do this for fun, and we're never going to really do this as a career. We just kind of do it because we like to, and because we want to share our knowledge with people. And so it's tough, and YouTube comments especially can be horrible, but there can be great ones too, and there are good people out there. And so hopefully through your content you attract the people that you want, and I do believe that Valve has a lot of responsibility here. I think before it got to the point where they were removing that company's games, all the people that said those like death threats and things like that, those should have been instantly banned from Steam.
Definitely.
And maybe they were. The article kind of says some people were banned, and on the Digital Homicide's main website, they say something about like this person got banned or something. And I don't know, but I agree that and these companies get really big, and they try to have automatic banning systems. Like YouTube, has their DMCA strike thing, and Steam has, I'm sure, Valve has, I'm sure, just like a system for reports, and if you get reported so many times you get suspended, then banned or whatever. But maybe it's time for those companies to have to kind of step that up and have real people going through these comments, and that's obviously what led to, we're not going to talk about it this week, but that's what kind of led to this new YouTube Heroes thing, where Google wants people to police YouTube for them, which is not going to go well, because the type of people that are going to police it are not going to be the people you want policing it. But
I'm going to drop a Harry Potter reference. It's the Inquisitorial Squad.
Nice.
From a game, my geeks out there.
See her, but I told you she was a big dork. I wasn't kidding. Big dork.
See, but I'm going to drop that, and like one person will get it and be like, yeah, Jen.
Yeah. Jen's my girl. Woo.
So, okay. Last question before we stop, though.
Okay.
Because you said something earlier when we were talking about the Nintendo DX, about how, or NX, I'm sorry, about how no matter what game you make, somebody's not going to like it for whatever reason. But we talked about how Paul Rudd, everybody loves Paul Rudd. Is there a video game Paul Rudd?
Oh, wow. That's a tough question.
Maybe if you want, you can think about it, and then we can talk about it at the next one.
I'll have to crank on that. I'll write that down. But, I mean, there are games that typically don't anger people. Even if people aren't interested in them, they aren't polarizing.
I'm looking for the Paul Rudd of video games.
Okay, so you got to then remember to ask me that.
I will.
Next week.
And
we'll do it.
Sounds good.
Cool.
Boom.
Awesome. Well, hey everybody, that was that's it. That's the first episode of Game Talk Radio, and we plan on doing this every week, try to give a recap of what's going on. And if you have any questions, we have email set up. We want to do more. I have Twitter set up at Game Talk Radio. Is that right? Is that GTR? Oh boy, I better check before I say it. Otherwise, you can email us at GameTalkRadioWI.com at gmail.com. And yeah, so we want to start adding like, fan interaction if people are listening and become our fans.
And if they're listening to this point.
And so, we'll put some shouts out there, and we want people to interact. So send us your questions. Obviously, I'm a big dork. I'd love to answer any questions you guys might have about things coming out, or if you want to ask me what games I like or what games Jen likes. Ask us anything that's appropriate.
Lots of games. I love lots of games.
and lastly, right before we go, we hope to entertain you guys. That's really it for us. We both have full-time careers, and we don't do this as a way to make money. We don't want this to be our career. We just kind of want to entertain people, and we really like doing it as our creative outlet too. It helps us with our daily lives and our own anxieties and our own things. So we like doing it, and hopefully you guys enjoyed listening to it, and you all have a great night. This is Greg.
This is Jen.
And game on.